Welcome to episode 4 of the Triumph Over Burnout Mum series on the Breakout from Burnout podcast. Almost forgot there. My name is Aisha Mohammed and I am your host. I am also a life coach and I help mums who are facing burnout to start and to go through their burnout recovery so that they can find their purpose and align their lifestyle with that so that they can live a more fulfilled life and live life on their own terms. Now, I came up with this podcast series because during some of my research, as well as in working with some women, I have found that burnout is something that needs to be highlighted as well as some education put out there because its beginnings was very much germane to the workplace whereby employees would become burnt out, which is a state of feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, anxious, um, not having interest in the things that used to light them up, and feeling sometimes depressed. And these are just some of the signs of burnout, and that had an effect on morale in the workplace. But what has been recognized is that burnout actually transcends into life, period. And therefore, you could be a stay at home mom and get burnt out. You could be a student. You could be a healthcare worker. You could be anything and end up suffering from burnout. And if you don't know the signs, then you won't really understand what you're dealing with to know how to handle it. And also, you won't know why you really need to take action because you don't know where you're heading. So I thought that it would be a good idea to have some women who have made their journey through burnout to the other side, whereby they're recovered, to tell their story, their burnout story. And that really does give some great insight into what it is, how it shows up, how it affects the lives of mums, and what can be done to get over it. So, let me introduce you to a brave and courageous woman, Joleen, who is my special guest for today. Joleen, thank you. Thank you for joining
Oh,
me over here on this
thank you for
Breakout from
having
Burnout
me.
podcast. You're welcome. Now, you have a very interesting story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into your burnout story. Who is Joleen?
So I am Joleen. Um, I have a dog. I like I work part time. Um, I'm just since recovering from burnout, I've put limits on myself, so I'm not go again.
Mhm.
Yeah, just enjoying life and hopefully not gonna lead myself into burnout again.
Mm, excellent. So, how did you enter into burnout? How did it all start?
So I was a single mom for probably about 12 years before I hit burnout. Um, I was just going on by doing everything I thought I had to do. With being a single mom, I didn't have shared responsibilities with anybody, so it was only me being the mom and dad and the sole breadwinner of the house. Um, so I was working. I went back to school at one point so I could get a higher paying job so I wasn't doing the minimum wage. I was also doing volunteer work, and that helped get experience for the higher paying jobs. Um, and then it just all seemed to come crashing down. Like I started to just put off looking after myself. It started with me being really tired, so I was struggling to get up in the mornings with my kids. Um, I was wanting to just sleep more than usual.
Mhm.
So I started to see my doctor, and she prescribed me a medication to help get me up in the mornings. That seemed to work, but my family and friends started to notice me declining, with me withdrawing from social outings with my friends and family functions. I would start saying, instead of showing up, I'd be like, oh, I'm busy. I'm either busy or I'm too tired. I was just going to stay home, which was really unlike me because I was at like all family gatherings. So I started to make changes in my life after talking to my doctor. I started to not take on so many shifts at work. And then my family started to see the decline in me. So they had taken me to the hospital. They did a 1-month evaluation on me, and they tried a few different medications just to get me functioning, because I'd started to sleep even more, like sleeping like 12 hours or more a day. I'd be getting my days mixed up a little bit. I think it was one day and it totally wasn't. So then I started missing work a little bit. I stopped volunteering because I just didn't have the motivation behind me to do it anymore. My kids were kind of glad, because then they thought they'd see more of me. But after that, I started decline even faster. So family and friends would come over to the house. They even would bring police at the time to take me to the hospital for more evaluations. I would explain to the doctors what I was going through and that I was already under doctor's care. And then my family they didn't seem satisfied, or they didn't believe me that I was under doctor's care. So they'd call the police and have them bring me in a few times, like probably once a month or so, to the hospital. Did a 2-week hold on me. And then I just stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. I didn't leave. I had nobody to pay my rent for me. So then I ended up getting evicted for that 1 month. So I got evicted and I ended up on the street for a year. So my kids went and stayed with family. I just stayed in shelters or in parks. And again, I was just sleeping while I was there. Like, I didn't engage in like drugs or alcohol or talk to anybody else on the street, really. I eventually followed people to soup kitchens so I could find out where they were so I could eat. I think it was my mom would try and take me to the shelters so I'd have places to sleep. Sometimes I'd get in, sometimes I couldn't, depending on how busy they were. And I was on the street for about a year when my aunt found me at one of the shelters, and she had the police bring me to the hospital, where I stayed for a good 3 months. The nurses just worked with me very slowly on relearning to look after myself, personal care, learning to be around people again, because I had avoided people when I was on the street. So it was a year without really being around anybody and socializing. So just slowly building up those skills again.
Yeah.
Getting reacquainted with my kids. My kids, they didn't understand what I was going through. They just understood that mom was sick. They didn't understand what was going on. Nobody knew how to explain it to them. So yeah, we just slowly took it from there. My doctor would not let me leave the hospital until I had a place to live and a source of income. So he put me on a government assistance program as a requirement for me to allow me to leave the hospital once I decided I was ready. And he was very cautious with letting me leave the unit on the hospital because he didn't want me to run away, which was very common for people that were in the hospital. Like, okay, I'm done here, and then run away. But I always made sure to come back because I started to look after myself again. I didn't want to continue or go back to being homeless. So I worked with like the social workers in the hospital and built connections. I had a health nurse in the community that I worked with several years, where she would continue to monitor me every couple of weeks when I first got out of the hospital and just check in to see how I was doing, what I was struggling with. Yeah.
Wow.
It helped me connect with other mental health groups in the community, just learning how to be an adult again because I had no responsibilities.
Wow.
So I'm learning to be responsible again, and
yeah. So you practically lost everything.
I did.
And had to rebuild your life all over again. Wow.
Yes.
That takes some real gumption to do that. So, I mean, what would you say were the early signs? Because it sounds like there was like a rapid decline. Did you notice some of the changes where you were, working, doing the volunteering, had a job and stuff like that? They'd taken on too much. Did you realize before then, was your body giving you any signs? Or
I think when I first started to notice it, I was starting to just be tired all the time. But according to my family and friends, they'd ask me how I was doing, and on a regular basis, for a while there, I was saying I was tired, but I'd still keep a very high-paced lifestyle with looking after 2 kids and managing a house plus working. I wasn't able to attain a full-time job, so I was working a lot of part-time casual jobs where I'd just pick up random shifts. So I didn't really have a routine to follow or to build a routine for myself. It was like sometimes I'd be working a night shift or a day shift or back-to-back shifts or whatever to pay the bills, and all that just took its toll. And when I started making changes and withdrawal from social activities, that's when my family and friends started to notice there was more changes, and that's what got them really concerned because I was big on family. So I was constantly going to all family birthday parties, anniversaries, Mother's Day, even like holidays, that kind of stuff. And when I started not going, that's when they really stepped in, and there's a few people stepping in, so it would be a different person every time because like, oh, I'm going to go and check on her this time, but she's not doing that well, so I'm going to bring the police and take her to the hospital. So sometimes I go to the hospital 2 times in a week with the police, and other times it would just be they'd leave me alone for a couple weeks, and then I'd start to get my days mixed up, and it just...
How were you feeling when all of this was playing out and you had, different people intervening, being put on medication? What thoughts were going through your mind?
I just wanted to be left alone. I didn't want to be around people. I just wanted to do my thing. I just wanted to sleep. And I had things like I had taken on too much. I was done. I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. It was very self-defeating. And then my kids went to go stay with their dad. So then I didn't have them to motivate me to continue getting up out of bed, because I didn't have to look after anybody but myself. And I'd been telling myself that, hey, you just need to sleep and get some rest and you'll be fine. And in reality, that once I had that mindset, I just kind of spiraled down very quickly. And then before I knew it, I was on the street. And then I got mad because I'm just like, what happened and how did this happen? And I'm just going to sleep and rest and hopefully things will get better. And yeah, just before I knew it, it had been a year. I hadn't even realized it. I thought it was only maybe a couple of months. But when my family came to visit me in the hospital, they said, no, you were there for a year. A lot of my family didn't understand what had happened. They just knew something had happened, and I wasn't like mentally, I was just drained.
So were you given an official diagnosis in being in hospital?
The first time I was in the hospital for the 30-day assessment, I voluntarily did some assessments with them, and they formally diagnosed me with major depression, but I didn't always feel depressed. So, like, I'd worked in the field. It was really interesting because I'd already worked in the mental health field with people with major depression and bipolar and schizophrenia and all that. So I'm just like, I don't think I'm depressed, but their standardized tests said I was. I'm just like, I think I'm just burnt out by the fast-paced life. But they tried me on different medications, and then they're like, okay, you need to connect with a psychiatrist and he'll further evaluate you over time. With the lack of services in the community because of all the large populations, I wasn't able to connect with a psychiatrist right away. So then that went back to being in and out of the hospital again until I spent my 3 months, until I was on the street for a year, and then I spent the 3 months. The psychiatrist there took me on as his client in his practice after releasing me from the hospital. And we tried a bunch of different medications in the hospital. One of the medications brought out some delusions in me. So they gave me a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. But since being off that medication, I haven't had any delusions. But he still kept that diagnosis. I'm just like, okay, like I can't, like I've talked to him a few times, but he said I was in that bad of a state that I'd not really clear. I remember having those delusions with being on the one medication, but I haven't had any delusions since, so I don't know. I think it was just the medication that they put me on. But he said no, so I can't exactly argue with a doctor who's been seeing me for probably 7 years now.
Wow. So are you on medication still?
I am. I'm on a few. I had returned to work because I was bored, so I wanted something to do. So he okayed me to go back to work part-time, and I did really, really well. So I thought I could go back full-time. So I tried a full-time position, but it was a supervisory position, and I'd never been in, like I'd filled in for supervisors, but I'd never been the actual supervisor. So I had all the supervisory responsibilities that started causing me anxiety. So I'd have anxiety attacks. So I was off most of my medication from the hospital. So then they had to add more medication. There was like fluvoxetine, I think it was. And then my sleep started going out of whack because of all the stress. So then they tried a couple different sleeping pills and another medication. I can't think of the name right now. Just to help stabilize it was a mood stabilizer, I think,
Mhm.
just to help stabilize with all the stress. And yeah, so I'm
So,
on minimal medication now. I'm
mhm.
not in the stressful situation because I stepped down as the supervisor, and then a lot of my symptoms went away with all of that. So I don't think I'm meant to be in high stress situations.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So you had to make some lifestyle adjustments
Yes.
majorly on your road to recovery. But what a brave woman. I mean, to just have things spiral like that, to lose your home, to end up on the streets, to end up on medication, it's a lot. But there's obviously a high level of self-determination because, here you are on less medication, doing something with yourself so that you're not bored and, living your life the best that you can.
Yeah.
And I think that's just really commendable. And for you to lend yourself to come on the podcast to tell your story of where things can ultimately end up if you don't spot the signs of burnout, to do something about it. It's a very serious phenomenon. And it's
It is.
definitely real. And it can really impact lives. I mean, where are you with your children? They're grown now. But
Yes, they're both adults.
mhm.
My son doesn't talk to me that much, really. He's still unsure. 'Cause he was just starting out as a teenager at the time, and so he didn't understand. I think he was just really hurt that I wasn't being there and being attentive like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not really communicating with me just yet. I'm hoping he'll come around still, but it's still taking some time. My daughter, we're closer than ever now. It took a bit to build up our relationship, like a couple of years before we would start talking on a regular basis. Like we'd have visits, like 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there kind of thing. And then she'd go off and do her thing because she was a teenager and it wasn't cool to hang out with mom. But she did her best with being a teenager. And eventually she did move back in with me for a couple of years. And then she moved out when she moved in with her boyfriend, when she moved up north and got a job up there. And so we talk almost daily sometimes, depending on her work schedule. And we talk about everything. We've had a lot of talks about what we went through, how we felt, how we understood it. She was very mad that nobody would tell her what was going on with me. Because she had moved in with her dad. He didn't know what was going on. He just saw that I'd lost a bunch of weight. And he didn't tell me what his suspicions were. He just had concerns for his daughter. So she went and lived with him. And his side of the family looked after her for a couple of years. But they didn't know what was going on because I lost my cell phone. So I had no way of communicating with anybody. And so I just explained to her, well, this is my side. This is how I saw things. And then we talked with my mom. And then when my daughter moved in with a friend of mine, when she was wanting to move back to Red Deer, she had more discussions about what happened. About how my friend was able to explain what was going on and what was happening. And then my daughter had some of her own issues pop up with being a teenager. So my friend dealt with those, but still kept me updated. So she just really helped with bridging our relationship and building it up again. So she's scared of burning out herself. And I'm just like, you're still young. Just I told her I don't want you to put limits on yourself. Just be conscious of how much you're doing and how much you take on in life. So you're not going to burn out. And if you feel unsure, just to talk about it. Like I told him, like, because I raised her to talk about her issues. She talks a lot when she was a kid, to the point where I had to ask her to be quiet at times. So she started to climb up as a teenager, and I just encouraged her to open up again. I'm like, you don't have to talk to me if you're not comfortable. You can talk to a counselor, you can talk to your friends, but just to get your feelings out there so you're able to communicate and I can't think of the word right now. But just so you build support around you. So there's people there to help you when you need it. So you don't get to where I was.
Yeah, that's some excellent advice. You've been so descriptive and so open. Thank you. There's a lot that can be taken from your story. You had different people intervene at times. You did find support at various stages, which is life-saving, because here you are now. I mean, when you were spending time homeless out there on the streets, I guess that was cut short by your aunt's intervention. It's a powerful story of ultimately where burnout could take you. I'm blown just sitting here listening to it. It's not my first time, but I'm still like, my God, this is really something. But the fact that, you are able to be, taking a journey of healing when it comes to your daughter, and I hope that things work out with your son, because obviously that was extremely disruptive to their relationship with you as their mum at that time, knowing what was happening, but knowing their mum wasn't there for them, couldn't be there for them, in the capacity of mum, because you were really going through it. And that just really graphically shows you what can happen, in a worst case scenario. But you had the strength to rise back up from the ashes and to start to rebuild your life, and to be very aware of when you're taking on too much. Was there anything else that you did apart from when it came to your employment? Is there anything else that you did in order to recover from burnout? What other lifestyle changes or routines or things did you change in order to come as far as you have?
I've worked really close with a health nurse. Where I live, they have a community outreach program, where they either come to you if you're not able to get to them. And we worked on everything from learning how to budget to building natural supports in the community. We talked about building friendships again. What else did we do? We'd set goals. I can't remember really any of my goals. But there's things like just setting up a bank account, because everything got closed on me. So yeah, from opening up a bank account to learning the bus systems so I can get around the city, and I wish I could remember, because it's all the little things that you don't actually think of, that I had to like relearn how to do, because I had a lot of anxiety about doing it. I was actually scared to leave the hospital, but I didn't feel I needed to be there anymore.
Wow.
So it's a lot of little things that you learn as a teenager, or just growing up as a child, like learning to cook even. It's just like, all right, I know how to do this, but what did I do before? So learning how to cook, learning how to grocery shop again, learning how to budget and make your money, because I was on limited income. So learning how to make my money last for the month, that kind of stuff.
Wow. So, what is your biggest lesson from this whole, um, gosh, burnout story? What stands out most to you? What's the lesson?
That it's okay to say no, and I'm not a bad person for doing that. Something I was doing before is I would I liked helping people. So I'd often say, yes, I can help you with this. I can help you with that. We can do this. We can do that. And then I'd forget to look after myself. So I'd put off like having the things that seemed really small, like showering every day or a couple times a week or whatever. I'd put that off because I'm like, okay, this person needs my help. I'll do that and I will shower later. Or with my work, it was, okay, if I say no to these shifts, are they still going to ask me to pick up shifts at work? And I had this fear of them always saying, we don't need you anymore, with being a part-time casual staff, that I was worried, like, how am I going to pay my bills if I say no to these shifts? So constantly saying yes to everything. And then it's just like, okay, since going through all this, it's just like, no, I will be okay if I say no. If I miss out on a couple shifts, everything's going to be okay. I'll still be able to pick up shifts at a later date. It's just my whole mindset around setting boundaries for myself and sticking to them, and changing my mindset from a fear-based mindset of being a single mom and saying, okay, I have to do this because of my kids, or I have to do this to look after my kids. I have to do this to look after myself, or I do this because it'll make this part of my life easier. And then it's like, okay, no, it's not going to make my life easier. It's going to cause me to have to work more, or it's going to have to cause me to do this. So I really take a good look at what I'm doing or what decision I need to make to look after me. Because now my kids are adults, so I don't have to work 24/7 or feel like I have to work 24/7 to look after them and raise them. I just have me now. So it's just like, hey, I can say no. I can not work night shifts. I don't have to do the volunteer work because I don't need the experience to get the jobs and all that kind of stuff.
I get it. Thank you. So I'm sure that that's very helpful for those out there, because
I hope so. It wasn't a fun journey.
No, no, not at all. God, I can't imagine it ever could. But, that's a great story, and that's some great advice. So many moms that I speak to find it very hard to say no and tend to people please. And that just leads to overwhelm and a ton of stress. So it's great that you've learned that, and that your mindset has changed to keep you in a safe place, whereby you'll be much less, likely to fall back into burnout, especially if you keep on practicing these things that you've put in place. So I just want to commend you for sharing your story and for, rising up again and working your way out of burnout. And I wish you all the best, Joleen. I so thank you for your bravery in coming on and telling your story. I really hope that the listening audience, that this will be able to help you see the depths of burnout, because burnout and depression, they are similar, but they're not the same. However, with this story, you can kind of see how it started out with burnout and led into something way deeper. And it's to be aware that if you don't tackle it, this is what ultimately can happen.
Yeah.
So, if you want some help with your burnout recovery journey, then I am here. And if you wanted to know how you can work with me, then you can go to my website, which is bestyouinmotion.com. You can find out more information, or you can DM me on Facebook. and I will get back to you. Um, Situations like this, when you have to do it alone, it can take a long time. So with a helping hand, you can recover from burnout much quicker than if you struggle alone. So you don't have to go it alone. Joleen, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you for
on.
having me.
It's been wonderful sharing time and space and hearing your story. I'm totally wowed by it, and I'm sure our listeners are too. I just thank you and wish you all the best. So, till next time, everyone. Next week, in fact, you will find me here again at 1 p.m. GMT, which is UK time, every Tuesday, 1 p.m. So I'll be back with another brave and courageous woman with another burnout story on the Breakout from Burnout podcast.